All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving deep into the big three clinical documents: the protocol, the informed consent form, and the investigator brochure. Now, if you work in clinical research, you already know these are the foundational texts that get literally every trial off the ground. And maybe more importantly, they're what keep it inspectable. So let's kick things off with a quote I absolutely love from Marcus. He's a senior clinical writer who's really been in the trenches. He says, "Protocols feel like templates until your sponsor changes the dose. Then they feel like 1,000 cross-references." It's kind of funny, but it is so true, right? Mastering these three foundational documents is pretty much the only way to prevent catastrophic regulatory failures when those inevitable last-minute changes hit your desk. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at protocol design, the ICF, the IBI, how they all interlock, and finally, some advanced craft techniques. Let's get right into it. Part 1. Designing the trial protocol. This is the ultimate blueprint. Think about Marcus for a second, a pharmacist turned writer who manages protocols across a massive oncology program. He reminds us that a protocol is not just one thing. It's a scientific design, an operational manual for the sites, a regulatory commitment to the agencies, and an ethical commitment to the patients, all wrapped into one massive document. Your job as a writer? Hold all four of those perspectives together without a single contradiction. It's basically a giant puzzle. To pull that off, the industry relies heavily on the ICH-M11 structure. You know it. It's the global default template. It flows super logically from the summary all the way down to ethics. But here's the reality check. The sections covering objectives and endpoints and the sections on safety and statistics, those are going to face the absolute most intense scrutiny from reviewers. That's where the stakes are the highest. Check out this real-world timeline because it brilliantly shows why nailing those safety sections early is a total game changer. At the synopsis stage, a sharp writer caught a gap in the stopping rules. The threshold was set in absolute counts instead of being rate adjusted. Just 2 weeks later, boom, an amendment goes through. 18 months into the trial, a safety signal actually pops up. But because of that early fix, the trial paused exactly as intended, the team reviewed the signal, and they safely restarted. Catching that one stopping rule gap literally saved an 18-month oncology program from a devastating clinical hold. So, if you want to avoid those brutal rewrite cycles yourself, you need to actively hunt for these common triggers before you ever hit submit on your first draft. Reviewers will aggressively flag inadequately defined composite endpoints. Inclusion criteria that actively contradict exclusion criteria, yeah, they'll catch that. Same goes for visit windows that don't align with your assessments. Hunt these down yourself, and you will literally cut your rewrite cycle in half. All right, let's pivot from the scientific blueprint to part 2, writing the informed consent form, or ICF. When you move from the protocol to the ICF, you have to execute this profound shift in your writer's voice. The protocol is third person, dense, highly technical, all about statistical power. But the ICF? You have to audibly shift your tone. It's written in the second person, addressing you. It needs a calm, balanced tone. And crucially, it has a strict reading age requirement of 8 to 10 years old. A great rule of thumb to remember: if a 12-year-old cannot easily summarize your paragraph, scratch that, you need to rewrite it. But don't let the simple language fool you. The ICF carries immense regulatory weight. Every single one of these 7 elements has to be there to meet ICH GCP requirements. You have to clearly balance known risks with the benefits, lay out data confidentiality, and assure them it's completely voluntary. You're effectively bridging rigid regulatory writing with deep, profound patient empathy. Moving right along to part 3, maintaining investigator brochures. Inside the IB, there is one piece that reigns supreme: the Reference Safety Information, or RSI. This is the explicit list of expected adverse events, and it directly drives the SUSAR expectedness determinations. It is the single most cited part of the IB by inspectors. Why? Because if this info is outdated, your site investigators are out there making critical patient safety decisions using the completely wrong baseline. Keeping this evolving safety story updated is, well, it's a beast. It requires a meticulous, annual, and sometimes event-driven update cycle. You've got pre-update data gathering, then 4 to 8 weeks of authoring, endless medical and safety reviews, and finally, getting it out to the sites fast. It takes seamless coordination by the clinical writer to pull this off. Which brings us to part 4, the keystone of this whole explainer, the 3-document interlock. These 3 documents, the protocol, ICF, and IB, They don't live in a vacuum. They form this deeply interconnected, fragile ecosystem. A single disconnected node, like say you update inclusion criteria in the protocol but forget the ICF, represents a dangerous drift. And believe me, this drift is exactly what regulators and inspectors are actively hunting for. Let's look at a composite case study of what happens when that interlock snaps. The trigger: a sponsor amends a Phase 3 protocol to add a new safety risk. The drift: the ICF wasn't updated, and sites kept enrolling patients for 2 whole months on the old consent form. The detection: a routine inspection easily spotted the mismatch. The consequence was massive: retroactive reconsent, a CAPA opened, and a major inspection finding. Nightmare scenario, right? This proves exactly why synchronizing these documents is totally non-negotiable. So, part 5, mastering the craft. How do senior writers actually stop this from happening in the real world? It comes down to 3 commitments. Commitment 1, start with the synopsis. Do not just dive headfirst into drafting a 100-page protocol. Write a 5 to 10-page summary first. This forces your clinical lead, statistician, and safety team to hash out their disagreements early. Investing 2 days into a rock-solid synopsis will absolutely save you 2 weeks of agonizing rewrites downstream. Fact. Commitment 2, build cross-reference discipline. Like Marcus warned us, protocols can turn into a maze of 1,000 cross-references. Use tracking matrices or automated Microsoft Word fields so everything links up perfectly. A broken cross-reference is the absolute easiest finding for an auditor to spot. But the good news? It's also the easiest to prevent, as long as you're diligent about refreshing those fields before locking versions. And finally, commitment 3, hold the interlock. You need a strict reconciliation checklist for every single amendment to map facts across the protocol, the ICF, and the IB. The big takeaway here is that you have to take personal ownership of this. If a colleague's rushed amendment threatens to break consistency across your document ecosystem, you have to push back. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this provocative question. Are your trial's 3 foundational documents telling the exact same story, or is a hidden drift just waiting for an inspector's eye? Take a hard look at your own interlock today and think about what steps you can take right now to build a more resilient clinical narrative. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and keep pushing for that clarity.